This particular use case is looking at consumer goods supply chain. So we have a customer in EMEA who operates within the beauty and healthcare sector. So very much of the supply chain distribution of goods from suppliers through to their end customers. So a key workflow within the supply chain space is something called source to pay. So for those of you that are not familiar with source to pay, it's effectively the end-to-end procurement process that's taking everything from identifying a need to buy something on behalf of a customer through to the supplier actually getting paid and recognizing the money for those goods. So it starts with sourcing, finding and contracting the suppliers, and ends with an invoice and matching payment. What does the operational flow look like? So I'm just going to step through the operational flow and where some of the friction arises through this particular use case. Really starting with the supplier, the purchase order gets raised for some goods. The supplier will issue what's known as an advanced shipment notice, an ASN, which is a confirmation of the goods being shipped. So a leader, the company that we built this AI use case for, will receive the notification of that from the warehouse. The warehouse then creates a goods receipt note, which is effectively mapped back to the invoice that leader will send back to the supplier. But the problem is the timeline of events that happen from that purchase order being raised to the generation of the invoice is there are points at which these identifiers, the ASN, the GRN, become disconnected, and they're not sequential in nature. So the friction really is in the middle. It's matching and understanding the continuity of that source to pay journey. So what can go wrong? I touched on it there. The ASN can arrive before the purchase order is actually confirmed and actually paid back to the supplier. The goods receipts can oftentimes have the wrong purchase order line as well. So there's again a breakdown in the continuity of the process. The quantity of the goods for the goods receipt doesn't match the advanced shipment notice as well. And sometimes the posting date can be out of range as well. What's the human cost? So again, thinking about the business sort of outcomes that we can hopefully unlock with AI, the typical individual sort of responsible for paying out that invoice and managing this process end to end can be 3 to 4 hours interrogating the logs to understand why, where the breakdown is within that process. So we wanted to sort of take this and really think about, again, where can AI intervene and help in this problem space. So firstly, throughout the process, there are a series of audit logs. So at each of the key steps, we track from purchase order through to the invoice generation, the key events that are happening. And the agents that we've built are effectively interrogating those logs in a few different areas. So we're using it to investigate and find failures within those logs, generate an investigation summary. I'll be showing you a short demo of that shortly. We've also got a separate agent that suggests a resolution. When it finds an issue and a breakdown within the logs, it can read and suggest a recommendation. There's also a Q&A agent as well, where the team can interact and ask specific questions about certain purchase orders and good receipts notes. And there's also a timeline, a business journey agent, which helps the customer understand, again, from start to finish, what the timeline of events is. Okay, so what does it look like? So let's look at the investigation agent, and I can take you through end to end what the interface looks like. So I'm just going to refresh my screen here. This is a representative example. We've used some mock data here, not to expose too much sensitive information. So we can see here at the bottom are the raw audit logs. So this is that sort of horizontal section you saw beneath the process, which is capturing the raw logs, again, the ASN, GRN numbers, the order IDs, bit of context around the error code, an error message. So if you're investigating these logs, as you can see, it's very hard to tie, again, the timeline across what are quite granular logs here. So I'm going to take an example question here. So we will take a purchase order, for example, and ask the agent which products were on the lines for purchase order 10021. And again, as we saw a second ago, oftentimes the order lines can get disconnected, and you don't get continuity between the two. So what the agent's doing here is going away, it's interrogating those logs and having AI effectively provide a recommendation to this question. Let that run a second. So we've got a response here. It's been able to fulfill the request here. It's given us the order lines from the logs with the representative SKUs, the ASN, GRN details. Again, gives a really nice sort of snapshot of the result there back to the user. We'll take one more. We'll ask about the supplier context here. So again, pulling in the supplier information. We'll let that run a second.
So Chris, we have somebody asking about if you can show the snap packs used for this solution. Will you be showing the pipelines for this one after?
Yes, I will. Yeah.
Okay.
So once we get a response here, I'll switch back to SnapLogic and we can see how we constructed this. Okay, so we got the supplier information again, constructing it in a nice visual way back to the team to answer the question. So we'll switch back to SnapLogic now. I'm going to sort of flip over to the pipelines. So I'm just going to switch orgs here. We've actually got this agent running in a different organization at the moment. I'll wait for that to load. So we can see here, very, very simple. This is the parent pipeline that is invoked by the agent. So we're doing a few different things here. Firstly, taking the prompt that we saw a second ago from the Streamlit interface. We're joining that with some context around the schema. So the customer in particular have a set of different database tables here that encapsulates the header and line information. So these are effectively just providing that context to the agent around the structure of the logs, some sample data. This information actually lives in a Postgres SQL database, but it could be it could be an ERP, any backend system that this data could live in. What we're doing here is joining that. We're actually giving it to the or defining a system prompt here that sets out the responsibility of the agent. So we're saying, so your role here is to take the user's prompt and use querying the underlying data to provide an answer to that question. We're given some concrete steps here that the agent needs to run through, and again asked it to provide a structured JSON response here, so we can get that predictability of the responses every time. We then hand that before handing it off to the agent. We've given it access to a tool here that can go away and read and extract the data that it needs based on that context. So I'll just flash that up quickly here. I'll show you what that looks like. That's just a simple database call. Still on one, sorry. Again, calling a Postgres database. The agent's actually able to construct the Postgres SQL dynamically based on the user's intent. So it's very, very dynamic in that regard. The customer uses 4.0 Mini, so a very low cost, efficient model It's able to handle these requests really well, keeping the cost down. And we'll see on the right here the responses handled and sent back to the user interface that we saw a second ago. We can also see here there's an audit step within the pipeline. So every interaction with this agent is logged within a JSON payload.